Hello, I am James Durham. I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of That's What's Up with Men. Do you find yourself at odds with a close friend? Is a coworker trying to undermine your credibility at work? Do you have a boss that you find difficult to get along with? Are you having issues with your spouse, your children, or your parents? If any of these scenarios fit your current circumstance, you are not alone. Opportunities for conflict are everywhere, in our home, in the workplace, the church, and the community. Your response could make or break the relationship in each of these circumstances. In the two-part series on conflict resolution, Pastor Coates offered us these 6 pointers to guide us through the process. Stay calm, seek counsel, seek compromise, embrace the tension, fight fear, and to show empathy and compassion for the other party or parties involved in the conflict. Knowing that conflict or the potential for conflict is ever present in human relationships, we want to follow up on this teaching from Pastor by having a dialogue tackling how men in particular handle conflict. Hopefully you will find some helpful tips in this dialogue to assist you in effectively handling the conflict in your life. I'd like to welcome our guest for this forum. First, Brother Cornelius Stevenson.
How you doing?
Thank you for coming out, sir. And then Brother Rick Mumford.
It's a pleasure, sir.
I appreciate you all taking the time to engage in this dialogue about conflict resolution. So why a conversation about conflict? We all face conflict daily and even often struggle with conflict, whether it's inward conflict dealing with the responsibilities of being a leader in our home or leader in the community, whether it's conflict with the spouse arising from financial issues or different relational issues, whether it's conflict with our children. Sometimes our children can be rebellious, and whether it's conflict on the job, interacting with different personalities. We face many different kinds of conflict every day without really realizing or connecting the conflict situations or what have you, without really looking for the patterns and seeing what we can learn from the conflict. So what I would like for us to do in this conversation is to sit back and explore different conflict that we experienced in our lives. Look at what it looks like to us, how it affected us, and then what opportunities we have when resolving conflict.
Right.
So I'd like to start off by asking generally, what is your personal view of conflict? What does conflict look like to you?
For me, conflict is more so anything that would challenge me morally and mentally and emotionally, that would cause me to have to make a decision whether to act right or wrong. That can be with a person, that can be with a situation, that can, things happen. So when it comes up, conflict is anything that would internally challenge me to make me do something right or wrong.
Okay. What about you, Rick?
Yeah, for me, conflict is a growth opportunity. I view it as a chance for me to get somebody else or another group's perspective, learn from it, grow from it, because, I don't know everything, and I'm always willing to learn. So by, being in conflict or disagreement with another party, it helps us grow and be better people.
Cool. I actually like to add to that, but first I'll say that conflict is inevitable. In human relationships, we're going to have some conflict. We all are individuals. We bring our different personalities and desires and ideologies to the table. So it's going to be time when we butt heads and when we have conflict. So with that, conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. We often look at conflict negatively.
Right.
But like you said, conflict is an opportunity for growth. Conflict is tension, and with that tension in the relationship, it provides us an opportunity to even become closer. Because when we experience some trials together, and then we come through and we still on the up and up, that can actually draw us together. So conflict is an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
I like that. Next question I like to ask is, I want to look at what experience have you had with conflict? I want to look at it two ways. Some negative experiences where the conflict didn't go so well, and then a time from beginning to end where it went very well. So what are your experiences with conflict?
I'll start out with the bad.
Okay.
At the workplace, I'm a senior procurement manager on my job. I work in construction. And, I deal with negotiating contracts, trying to get a subcontractor to the right price for a particular scope. In this particular case, we had a subcontractor, one of three, that was looking at, a mechanical package. And this subcontractor, we hadn't worked with them before, and we invited them in to kind of sit down, get to know them, see how they operate, see if their, mission with their company aligned with ours. In some cases it did, in some cases it didn't. So where we differed, we try to, meet in the middle. But from that meeting, this particular subcontractor thought that they were entitled to get the work. And, I felt like I was pretty clear with them prior to coming in that, look, this is part of the process. We were reviewing the scope here first. I'm not making any commitments to you to get this job, but we just want to, get a feel for how you guys operate and make sure you can do the work. So leaving that meeting, once I made the call that, hey, we went with another subcontractor and, they had the full scope and the right price and they were capable of doing the work. Well, this particular subcontractor felt like, okay, well, I don't want to work with your company. I felt like you guys used us and, invited us in, trying to get us all, warm and fuzzy about doing the work, and then you just kind of pulled the rug from underneath us. And from that point on, this subcontractor wouldn't provide, any pricing to us on any projects. But, I felt like I handled the situation, properly, but they thought otherwise. So I guess we just had to agree to disagree and move on.
Okay. So we can say that particular conflict was about maybe them feeling personally slighted. So that's one way conflict arises, being personally slighted. Although that wasn't what you was given to them. Exactly. That's just the way, that was their perception of the situation.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What about you?
For me, I know the way I was brought up, I lived in the inner city. So, it was always a lot of things around us and I grew up and, I used to live in the projects and sometimes we would have food, sometimes we wouldn't. So, as a kid, you don't really understand the magnitude of that and you just feel like every day is a play day, but as you get older, you start understanding what you're lacking. And as I've gotten older and I look back at those, situations and how my mom and dad just showed love in that situation, like we wouldn't, we wouldn't necessarily pray, but they would always just show love at all times. We was always a loving family, so I had enough love, maybe not enough food, but love is what got me through. And but also it caused a level of anxiety, so I used to lash out a lot as a young kid. So I was very impatient with anything, no matter what it was. I was always I found myself in a situation where kids would say something about certain things that I wore, because it might have been this, me wearing it the same day over and over. So they would say stuff, and I would just lash out and react in a way that, I'm not a fighter, but I wanted to fight because that was the only way I could get them to be quiet.
Okay.
So and I found myself when my parents moved to Maryland, I fought one of my friends, and that was the first time that I really looked at my life and I was like, I can't be fighting people that I actually care about, and it, that kind of just changed the way I felt, by handling the conflict and about myself actually.
Okay. So it sounds like you were lashing out to others because of frustration.
Right.
And maybe embarrassment when they would
right.
pick on you or what have you. So, and you say you learned from that, not
right.
to, what lesson did you take away from that exactly?
But the lesson that I took from that is that nothing is bigger than God, for one. Okay. And not only that, is that no matter if I fight that person or not, my issues won't change.
Okay. Right.
So I use those skills in my parenting. Like there's nothing that my daughter can do to get my voice to go above what it is right now. And that's the way that I approach it. No matter what she does, and I try to approach her in that same manner. It's like it's okay, it's fine. We all make mistakes,
okay.
and because I don't want her to have the same anxiety I had, the same level of frustration that I had. So I try to use that approach, and actually, I use it with her, but I use that with everybody. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to do all of that because it won't change the situation.
Right.
So
instead of focusing on your frustrations on what you can't control, worry about what you can control.
Right.
So in my experiences, I've had a number of times, as most of us can say, for handling conflict not so well.
Right.
And in those instances when I handled conflict in a way that wasn't good or we didn't come to any kind of resolution, that was because I was either caught up in thinking I'm right and staying stuck on that. It's almost it's a degree of being arrogant. You know, I'm right, So I'm just going to dismiss what you have to say. And so we can't get stuck on being right, whether we are right or whether we feel we right, because sometimes we think we right and we're really not. And then sometimes we really are right. But even in those situations when we're resolving the conflict, we should still be open-minded.
Right.
Right. So let's look at some positive examples of ways that we handle conflict.
Sure. I'll go back to the workplace. I had another subcontractor that we had tried to work with in the past on another project, and they felt like they had the right number and they had a relationship with the owner of the project that we were going to work for. So they felt like they had the inside track, and a previous co-worker was working on that package with this subcontractor. And as they went through the negotiations, we had to go another direction because the subcontractor either wouldn't sign up to our standard terms and conditions for the company, or didn't have the right price or the right scope, whatever. But they felt like they were entitled because they had a relationship with the owner. So time passed. We were awarded another project that was actually right next door to that one that we're working on now. And I stepped in to work with the same subcontractor. And lo and behold, he had the right price, right scope, and the only thing we didn't have was the terms and conditions for the company agreed upon. Okay, so I had to go through that negotiation with him. And, as I talked to him, I kind of discovered that they were still salty about how the previous negotiation went. So they were just going to hold their ground on certain things and not be flexible and not agree to certain terms. And it kind of prolonged getting that package awarded, which it didn't really impact the project, but it shouldn't have gone on as long as it did. So I tried to work through everything with the subcontractor and, kind of share with them that we have a new philosophy, and me knowing how things went the last time, just kind of understanding what their stance was and why they felt like, they were overlooked.
Okay.
So as we got to the end of the negotiations, we found a mutual respect for each other.
Okay.
And the subcontractor knew that, talking to me, this guy really, has a sense of integrity. He understands, construction, and, he understands how the situation went before, and is, taking ownership for his company, not him personally, but taking ownership for his company on how they could have handled it better.
Okay.
So as a result of that, the subcontractor, I awarded the job to him, and now we have a great relationship. And, I even looked to him to do some personal work at my house now. So I feel like that was a victory,
Right.
in building that relationship and working through that previous conflict with that subcontractor currently.
Good.
Right.
That's good. But let me say, it sounds like you either got a real tough job or a very interesting job. What about you, Cornelius?
Well, the positive side of everything that I talked about first was the negative. The positive side of that is that everything that I've gone through has, as I look back at what I went through to get me to this point, is just, it's good to reflect, and I just think about, how when any situation comes up, no matter what it is, if I can't fix it, I don't worry about it. And versus when I was going through everything else in my life before, no matter what happened, I always felt frustrated. I always felt like I didn't have the patience to deal with it. I just wanted to resolve it physically without necessarily thinking about what I needed to do to
Acting
get it
out.
Yeah, right. Just basically acting out. So it's like now, no matter what happens, it could be the worst thing in the world. My grandmother passed maybe like 2 weeks ago, and she helped raise me. But would put things in perspective for me, because I could have lashed out and reacted emotionally, but I thought about the type of woman she was, the type of love she had for me, and knew that if she chose, if it was her time to go and she was done fighting, it was her decision. So the love that I had for her had to help me let her go, and not to be so selfish and think about what I wanted, and just think about what she was doing for herself, and what if she went, then she really put up a good fight, and it was time for her to go. And so had that been me, some time ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it to this point. And so just everything that I've been through just put me in the right place, to where as though I'm always putting things in perspective, no matter what it is.
Praise the Lord.
That's awesome. That's
Right.
awesome. Sorry to hear about your
I appreciate it.
grandmother,
Thanks.
by the way.
Yeah.
But looking at how we handle certain conflicts in our life, well, I want to look at just different approaches that I began to take that kind of help me better handle conflict.
Right.
First, when I started going deep in my relationship with God, I began to pray before attempting to resolve conflict, especially with my wife. You know, and I noticed once I prayed first, and it wasn't a prayer about change her. It was an introspective prayer about give me the right perspective, help me to be open-minded. And so with those things, have to be open-minded when we approach and handling conflict or what have you. And then we have to focus on behaviors. Because often when we have issues with others, it's because of the behavior that one of us did or both of us engaged in that caused the conflict. So you want to focus on changing the behaviors. And then focus on always being progressive. We always want to have an end goal in mind, and let's just work doing resolving the conflict to meet that end goal. We're going to take a quick break here. To continue viewing the content, click on part 2.